Ah, the illusions of youth. I remember that day vividly, a memory etched in the fabric of my mind, a tapestry woven with threads of both embarrassment and revelation. I was a young writer, a dreamer with ink-stained fingers and a heart full of ambition, yet my pockets were perpetually empty. The streets of Paris were alive with possibility, but for me, they echoed with the sound of coins clinking together, mocking my financial woes. And then came the invitation from Madame, a woman of sophistication and an Epicurean palate, whose words dripped with praise for my fledgling work. How could I possibly refuse? As I sat at that luxurious restaurant, the air thick with the scent of fine cuisine and the soft murmur of cultured conversation, I felt a mixture of excitement and dread. The tables around me were adorned with gleaming china, polished cutlery, and delicate floral arrangements, all of which seemed to mock my frugal existence. I had dressed carefully, donning my best attire, trying to project an image of success despite the gnawing anxiety in my gut. When she arrived, her presence was as commanding as I had imagined. She glided toward me, her elegance undeniable, a whirlwind of charm and confidence. "Ah, my dear boy," she exclaimed, her voice a melodic lilt. "How delightful to see you! Paris suits you!" Her smile was warm, but I could sense the undercurrent of scrutiny behind her eyes, as if she were assessing my worth not just as a writer, but as a man. "And you, madame, seem as radiant as ever," I replied, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Oh, but I must be careful," she said, her tone suddenly serious. "I never eat more than one thing at lunch. Moderation, my dear, is the key to a healthy life." As the waiter approached, my heart raced. I knew that whatever she ordered would set the tone for the meal, and I braced myself for the inevitable financial disaster that awaited me. "May I take Madame's order?" the waiter inquired, his politeness a stark contrast to my growing unease. "Certainly," she declared, scanning the menu with a practiced eye. "I think I shall have the salmon. Oh, and a little caviar to begin. But just a little." "Just a little caviar?" I felt a cold sweat break out on my brow. The price of that alone could wipe out my meager savings. I forced myself to remain composed, to not let the panic show on my face. "And to drink?" the waiter prompted, his pen poised to jot down her order. "Oh, white wine, of course, but only a glass. One mustn't indulge too much," she replied, as if she were imparting the wisdom of the ages. "Excellent choice, madame. And monsieur?" The waiter turned to me, his eyes expectant. Just coffee," I stammered, my mind racing. "Oh, nonsense," Madame laughed, a sound so carefree it made my heart sink further. "You must eat something. Perhaps a mutton chop?" "Yes, a mutton chop," I replied weakly, feeling the weight of my choices settle heavily on my shoulders. Madame continued, her gaze flitting around the restaurant as if she were critiquing the very decor. "What a lovely restaurant! So quaint, so Parisian. Oh, but I simply must have some asparagus." She turned to the waiter with a flourish. "You do have asparagus today, don't you?" "But of course, madame," the waiter replied, his demeanor unwavering. "Asparagus, the most expensive item on the menu." My heart sank further into my empty wallet, and I could feel the walls closing in around me. "I only eat a little, you know. Never more than I need," she said, her laughter ringing through the air like a bell. If only my wallet could say the same, I thought bitterly, watching as the waiter jotted down her extravagant order. As the food arrived, I felt a mixture of dread and resignation. The waiter presented our dishes with a flourish, his bon appetit echoing in my ears as I stared at the lavish spread before us. Madame ate delicately, savoring each bite as if it were a work of art, while I picked at my mutton chop, the taste overshadowed by the gnawing anxiety in my stomach. "My dear," she said between bites, "tell me about your work. Such talent in one so young." "Ah, well, I try," I thought, my mind drifting as I watched my money disappear with every passing moment. "Oh, and I must have an ice cream," she declared suddenly, her eyes sparkling with delight. "Just a little something sweet, and perhaps coffee. No sugar, of course. I mustn't indulge." "Of course." I sank further into my chair, feeling like a marionette whose strings had been cut, leaving me to flounder in a sea of embarrassment. The waiter returned, presenting the bill with a flourish. "Monsieur!" I took the bill, my heart racing as I read the total, horrified. It was a sum that felt impossibly large, a mountain I could not climb. "Such a charming afternoon, my dear," Madame said, oblivious to my despair as she rose from her seat, her presence still commanding. "We must do this again." "Indeed," I grimaced, handing over my last francs, feeling the weight of my financial ruin settle heavily on my chest. As she departed, her laughter trailing behind her like a sweet perfume, I sat in stunned silence, reflecting on the absurdity of it all. Years later, as I chanced upon her again, plump, robust, and thriving, I finally felt a sense of vindication. The memory of that lunch lingered, a reminder of the folly of youth, of the illusions we chase, and the harsh realities that often accompany them. In the end, it was not the lavish meal that haunted me, but the realization that the true cost of that luncheon was not merely monetary. It was a lesson learned in the currency of experience, a reminder that sometimes the most extravagant indulgence is not found on a menu, but in the choices we make, the company we keep, and the stories we tell.